I never thought a comment about my pregnant body would be the thing that finally woke me up. For 5 years, I'd ignored the red flags, made excuses, and convinced myself things would get better. But standing in my kitchen, 7 months pregnant and dripping with sweat from carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs alone, I heard him say something so cruel that the fog finally lifted. His gaming friends laughed through his headset, and in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. I was exhausted. Not just tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from growing a human while managing everything else alone. At 7 months pregnant, every movement felt like wading through water, and today had been particularly brutal. My shift had run long, and I'd stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor with no elevator, and my car was loaded with bags. As I pulled into our parking spot, I tried to calculate how many trips it would take and whether my back could handle it. When I walked through the door with the first load, he was exactly where I expected him to be, sprawled on the couch, gaming headset on, surrounded by empty energy drink cans. The apartment smelled like stale chips and unwashed laundry. "Hey, could you help me bring up the rest of the groceries?" I asked, setting down the bags I was carrying. He waved his hand dismissively without looking at me. "In the middle of something important right now." Important. A video game was important. More important than his 7 months pregnant wife struggling with heavy bags up 3 flights of stairs. I didn't argue. I'd learned that arguing was pointless. Instead, I went back down for the next load, then the next, then the next. By the 6th trip, my maternity shirt was soaked with sweat. My back felt like someone was twisting a knife between my vertebrae, and I could feel my ankles swelling inside my shoes with each step. When I finally set down the last bags, I collapsed into a kitchen chair, trying to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, and I could feel the baby doing somersaults, probably protesting the stress I was putting on both of us. That's when he glanced over from the couch. His eyes swept over me, sweaty, exhausted, clearly struggling, and he said, "You're getting disgusting to look at. You better lose that weight fast after the baby, or I'll find someone who actually takes care of herself." I heard laughter coming through his headset. His friends had heard every word. He'd wanted them to hear. The old me would have cried. The old me would have apologized, maybe even made a joke about how pregnancy had ruined my body. Instead, something inside me went completely still and quiet. I stood up, walked over to where he sat, smiled, and kissed his forehead. "I'm going to take a shower," I said calmly. The confused look on his face would have been funny if my heart wasn't shattering. In the shower, with the water drowning out any sound, I finally let myself feel everything. But they weren't just sad tears. They were clarity tears, angry tears. 5 years of red flags I'd ignored suddenly came into perfect focus. This wasn't new behavior. It was just the most blatant example yet. And I was about to bring a child into this environment. A daughter who would learn that this is what relationships look like, that this is how people who love you treat you. Absolutely not. I got out of the shower, put on my most comfortable clothes, and told him I needed some air. He barely looked up from his game. I grabbed my hospital bag, already packed because I'm a planner, my laptop, important documents, and walked out. 20 minutes later, I was checking into a hotel. My sister answered on the first ring. "I need help," I said, and told her everything. "I'm coming tomorrow," she said immediately. "We're going to figure this out." That night, he called twice. Both times were to ask where the leftovers were in the fridge. Not where I was, not if I was okay. Where the leftovers were. I knew then that leaving was the only option. But I was terrified. 7 months pregnant, our lease in both names, finances partially entangled. I'd been counting on having a partner for childcare and expenses. But I kept coming back to that moment in the kitchen. The casual cruelty. The fact that he wanted his friends to hear it. The way he said it like he was commenting on the weather. My baby deserved better. I deserved better. Over the next month, I lived a double life. Outwardly, I was the apologetic, hormonal wife who had overreacted. Inwardly, I was systematically preparing my escape. I kept a detailed journal of every comment, every dismissal, every moment of cruelty. I quietly recorded some of our conversations on my phone. My lawyer said it could help. I'd always kept my paycheck in a separate account, thank goodness. Now I moved everything to a new bank entirely. I began transferring small amounts from our joint account, reclaiming what I'd contributed over the years. While organizing our finances, I discovered something that made me physically ill: a credit card in my name that I'd never opened. He'd racked up over $5,000 buying gaming equipment. I reported it as fraud immediately. I gathered every important document: birth certificate, marriage license, bank statements, and moved them to a secure location. My sister helped me find a ground floor apartment with laundry in the unit and a secure building. I signed the lease in secret. Living this double life was exhausting, especially while 8 months pregnant. But each step toward freedom gave me strength. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Cooking his meals, laughing at his jokes, listening to him complain about his band. Sleeping next to him made my skin crawl now that I'd stopped gaslighting myself about who he really was. He got worse too. Now that he thought I'd accepted his behavior, the mask slipped further. He invited friends over without telling me, then demanded I order them pizza while I was lying down with back spasms. When I said I was in pain, he actually said, "Being pregnant isn't a disability. Women have been doing it forever." His friends were right there, hearing everything. One looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. After they left at 2 a.m., leaving destruction everywhere, he tried to initiate intimacy. When I said I was exhausted, he responded with something so degrading, I went to the bathroom and cried silently. But I reminded myself, just a little while longer. My escape was planned for the weekend. He went to his parents' place for his father's birthday. A full 24 hours while he'd be gone. The moment his car pulled away, my sister arrived with her SUV. My best friend came with a borrowed moving truck, and surprisingly, his younger brother showed up. He'd witnessed one of the outbursts and had secretly offered to help. We had 32 hours to move me out completely. Walking through that apartment one last time was surreal. For 5 years, I'd lived there, slowly losing pieces of myself while pretending everything was fine. We worked systematically. Personal items first, then baby supplies I'd purchased, then furniture that was clearly mine. His brother handled the heavy lifting, and at one point he paused and said, "What he's doing to you is wrong. Our mother raised us better than this." The most satisfying moment was disconnecting his precious gaming PC, the one he'd fraudulently bought with my name. I packed it carefully in its original box. His brother carried it to the truck without a word. By evening, most of my belongings were in my new apartment. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor, eating from the box, laughing with exhaustion and relief. The next morning, we went back for the final phase. I deep cleaned the apartment. Not for him, but because I didn't want him to have anything else to complain about. On the kitchen counter, I left the divorce papers, a folder documenting his financial fraud, a USB drive with recordings of his verbal abuse, and a note that simply said, "Find someone better from your couch. I already have." Once I was safely in my new place, I called his phone. No answer. I left a voicemail telling him not to look for me at my sister's house, and that he'd find everything he needed on the kitchen counter. Within an hour, my phone was exploding with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, clearly him using his friends' phones. I didn't answer. His mother called my sister, and to my surprise, she broke down crying and apologized for her son's behavior. According to his brother, who kept me updated, he came home early after getting my message. He went ballistic finding the empty apartment and divorce papers. He called everyone we knew, alternating between rage, confusion, and suddenly claiming he wanted to fix things. Several of his friends actually reached out to support me. They admitted they'd been uncomfortable with his behavior but hadn't spoken up. One confessed they'd had a conversation with him about how he treated me, but he'd dismissed them. I wish they'd said something to me directly, but I understood why they didn't. I was exhausted, but relieved. My new apartment was small but bright, with a park nearby and a balcony where I'd already set up a chair. The hospital was only 10 minutes away. The baby was due in just over 3 weeks. I never imagined doing this alone, but I'd rather be a single mother than raise her in that environment. That night, he sent an email saying he was coming to my sister's place to talk and that I was making a huge mistake. I'd already warned her, and she told him if he showed up, she'd call the police. He showed up anyway, at 11 p.m., pounding on her door and yelling for 10 minutes. Her neighbor recorded everything. He left our wedding photos on the porch with a note saying, "I threw away everything we built." The irony wasn't lost on me. The next morning, his tone completely shifted. He sent an apologetic email, promising to change, go to therapy, be a better father. The old me might have wavered. The new me recognized it as manipulation. His apology was all about him. how he felt, what he wanted, how hard this was for him. Not once did he acknowledge specifically how he'd hurt me or how his behavior might affect our child. I didn't respond. My lawyer advised against any direct communication. I spent the day setting up the nursery with my sister, trying to rest. The baby was extra active, as if she knew we were finally somewhere safe. My daughter arrived 3 weeks early, just 5 days after I'd moved into my new apartment. 19 hours of labor, 3 hours of pushing, and at 6:22 a.m., she came into the world screaming. The moment they placed her on my chest, I knew every difficult decision had been worth it. I didn't inform him I was in labor. My lawyer said I wasn't obligated to, and given his erratic behavior, I didn't want that stress. I notified him the day after via email with a formal photo and basic health information. His response was chaotic: anger about not being called, demands to see her immediately, accusations that I was using her as a pawn. My lawyer handled all communication, explaining we'd establish formal visitation through the courts. The divorce proceedings were exactly as difficult as expected. He contested everything: custody, belongings, even my car that I'd owned before we met. His tune changed when my lawyer presented evidence of his fraud and abuse. We finally settled 3 months ago. I have primary custody. He has supervised visitation for 4 hours every other weekend. Child support was set based on his actual income, which was higher than he'd claimed. He kept his belongings, I kept mine, and he's responsible for the fraudulent debt. He's seen our daughter exactly twice since she was born. The first visit, he showed up 40 minutes late and spent most of the time taking photos for social media. The second visit, he seemed uncomfortable with her fussiness and left early. He's canceled the last 3 scheduled visits with increasingly thin excuses. Part of me is hurt for her sake, but mostly I'm relieved. Each interaction is draining, and his inconsistency would only confuse her later. Now, 6 months later, my daughter is healthy, happy, and absolutely the light of my life. She has my eyes and a personality entirely her own. She started sitting up last week and is obsessed with a stuffed animal my sister gave her. Financially, I'm stable. The child support helps, and I've become much better at budgeting. I've even started a small savings account for her future. As for him, I heard through mutual friends he's telling everyone I had postpartum psychosis and stole his daughter and his money. He conveniently leaves out his financial fraud and verbal abuse. Sometimes I think about that day with the groceries, how it felt like the worst moment of my life, but was actually the moment that saved us. My body has healed, though it's different now. Stretch marks, a scar, 15 pounds heavier than before pregnancy. And I'm completely at peace with that. His mother has been respectful and genuinely seems to care about her granddaughter. I'm considering allowing supervised visits with her, separate from his time. My daughter deserves to know family members who will love her consistently and respectfully. Looking back, I realize I spent 5 years confusing control for care and convenience for love. Never again. Every time my daughter laughs, especially when I sing to her while dancing around the kitchen, I'm reminded that I made the right choice. She'll grow up knowing her worth, seeing strength in her mother, and understanding that leaving a bad situation isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself, and that's a lesson worth teaching.